What's up, guys? Sorry, that's usually how they start YouTube videos. My name's Iaria. I'm a huge professional wrestling fan. Been watching professional wrestling as long as I can remember. Jersey Shore guy, so I'm in WWE territory, you know, right in the epicenter of it, in between Philly and Manhattan. You know, got to do all the MSG shows, all the Nassau Coliseum shows. You know, we had all the NWA stuff on TV here when I was growing up. We got ECW right in, you know, the hearts of the ECW eras and stuff like that. So New Jersey is a really good melting pot for professional wrestling as far as being able to see shows and getting able to see content, you know, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even up to today. I've had some time off the last couple weeks, so one of the projects that I wanted to work on is doing some YouTube videos. I uploaded some songs with my son, and you know, I'm trying to do some funny skits and stuff with my son, and then some music stuff that I've been working on. And one of the things I wanted to work on is doing some YouTube videos about unsung professional wrestling eras that don't get talked about a lot. Everybody talks a lot about the golden era of professional wrestling, whether that again is 50s, 60s, or 70s. You know, that was a time when pro wrestling was still real. People were going out to see it at nights in suits, and it was you know, all adults, and it was classy, and there was Gorgeous George, up to Buddy Rogers being the man, up until young Bruno Sammartino coming up. Everybody obviously talks a lot about the boom in professional wrestling, the rock and wrestling era, the 1984, 1985, the rise of Hulkamania, MTV getting in, WrestleMania 1, all that, and obviously the Vince McMahon, you know, killing the territories and going national and global with professional wrestling, and it becoming, you know, larger than life. And also everybody talks about the Attitude Era being a major professional wrestling era, because that was another giant boom in the, you know, the late 97, 98, 99. Stone Cold Steve Austin coming up, the Montreal Screwjob, Bret the Hitman Hart, the Monday Night Wars. Those are obviously, you know, the three main big eras that people talk about as being larger than life. But I want to delve into and give my thoughts on some of my favorite eras of professional wrestling that don't get talked about a lot. I'm going to try to keep these short. I don't want to, you know, make a half-hour video. This is going to get like 4 views, I imagine, anyway. But again, just this is me sort of as a video diary, my thoughts for future reference if anybody wants to, you know, see what I was thinking about. I didn't write down a lot of stuff. I have my cell phone here out and Wikipedia open. Basically, I have a couple of notes jot down from my favorite pay-per-views and, you know, some stuff that I was working on for it. But it's basically off the top of my head. I consider myself a pretty good wealth of knowledge in the subject of pro wrestling. So what I just want to do is go over, this is the first video, I'm only going to go over one era, but I want to do a couple of these and hopefully, you know, shed some light on some things that nobody thought about before, give my opinions, and maybe convince some people that these were also great eras as well. So again, we're discounting the golden era, we're discounting rock and wrestling, we're discounting attitude era. Obviously those are the big eras that everybody still likes to talk about and consider the best, and oh, you know, it was better this day. But I'm going to give you some of mine. And starting first and foremost is the 1992 WCW era. Now, WCW doesn't get a lot of play up until around the Monday Night Wars. They were sort of the redheaded stepchild. They didn't do great nationally. They were sort of a southern market. And they didn't have good merchandising. You know, you couldn't find it on TV everywhere. Again, luckily, being in New Jersey, we were able to. But the 1992 era of WCW, going, you know, over things from, you know, you're talking about guys like Sting and Vader and Ron Simmons winning the title, and guys like Great Muta, Barry Windham, all in their primes. And there was a lot of great matches, a lot of great pay-per-views, and I want to go over that in detail and, you know, and explain why I think WCW 1992 was a great era. I'm going to start with Starrcade 1991. Now, Starrcade 1991, obviously not in 1992, but it was December 29th of 1991. So right at the very, very tail end of 1991 is when things, in my opinion, started getting interesting for WCW. Okay, Starrcade 91 also gets a lot of heat. That was the Lethal Lottery pay-per-view. People didn't like this, stipulation and match types and stuff like that, but I loved the idea. Basically, it was tag team matches, the random pairings of tag teams, and then the winners of each tag team match would advance on into a battle royal, and then the winner of the battle royal was considered the Battle Bowl Lethal Lottery winner. So again, going back to, you got guys like Marcus Alexander Bagwell. In his youth, he was like, very, very young man. You got and then in the first match, you had Jimmy Jam Garvin going against Michael P.S. Hayes. The Freebirds were battling out against each other. You had Steve Austin and Rick Rude. Again, Dangerous Alliance guys. Dangerous Alliance, probably the most underrated faction in professional wrestling history. You're talking about Paul Heyman being the ringleader of guys like Rick Rude, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Larry Zbyszko, the Enforcer Arn Anderson, Medusa. That was a huge, huge stable that doesn't get a lot of play, and had it stayed around a little longer, whatever it may have, but it didn't. So again, don't sleep on the Dangerous Alliance either. You had guys like Elegante, okay, like he, couldn't work, giant guy, whatever, but again, a spectacle. You had Dustin Rhodes in his prime. He had just come off of his WWF run, came to WC, he kind of cut his teeth there when his dad was wrestling in WWF, and now he's really starting to make the jump and do well in WCW. Also another underrated, Big Josh was a character on this pay-per-view. Big Josh, lumberjack gimmick. He ended up going on to becoming Doink the Clown and stuff like that. But I always liked that Big Josh gimmick. I don't know why. They made a Galoob figure of him that was an exclusive only in the United Kingdom. So we didn't get the Big Josh Galoob WCW action figure around this time, but I always wanted to. Same thing with Elegante and Dustin Rhodes, by the way. You got Jushin Thunder Liger teamed up with Bill Kazmaier. If that's not the weirdest tag team ever assembled in a tag team match, I don't know what is. Bill Kazmaier, famously the strongman fame. I remember watching the strongman competition, the World's Strongest Man competitions back in the day on weird ESPN channels. Bill Kazmaier was either always competing in them or an interview for him. And Jushin Thunder Liger, obviously one of the greatest of all time. He just retired like a year ago, and you're talking about 30 years ago. Mike Graham was on this pay-per-view, which is weird. Mike Graham, rest in peace. He famously committed suicide. I think his father also committed suicide, and his grandfather may have actually there may have been a whole sad lineage of suicides in that family. But his father, obviously, very big promoter in Florida, ran the Florida territory for a long time. I loved guys like the Z-Man and Flying Brian Pillman, even though Z-Man wasn't a great draw or whatever. Guys like that always put on good matches. He was in the pay-per-view like this. And again, you had the guys like Sting and Vader. Sting was basically the epitome of good guys. He was the best good guy character you could pretty much create out of a comic book or a movie or a video game. And Vader was essentially the antithesis of that, as being the biggest, baddest monster heel that there could be. You couldn't have really written a better one. All of these matches in Starrcade 91, there's 10 matches. All of them led up to the big Battle Bowl Battle Royal for Lethal Lottery. And of course, Sting being the super face at the time, he last eliminates Lex Luger to win that. Huge, big deal. I love the concept. I really wish they would bring something like that back. You don't get to see a lot of unlikely tag teams or tag teams going against each other nowadays and stuff like that, and I think that's a cool concept. After the Starrcade, they did the WCW New Japan Super Show and stuff like that, which I'll probably get into in another thing. You can't really get that on the WWE Network or anything like that. We also had Super Brawl. Okay, so Super Brawl came in February of '92. So again, early '92 now we're talking about. You got guys like Big Josh and Diamond Dallas Page in a dark match. Diamond Dallas Page, wasn't even anybody yet. He was still working underneath everywhere. Then you got Flying Brian Pillman versus Jushin Liger. Any day of the week, I'll watch that match anywhere, those two guys really knew how to work together. They complemented each other very well. Liger and Pillman are, with the chain wrestling and stuff like that. Those are matches that I love to watch. Guys like Rob Van Dam versus Jerry Lynn, or Dean Malenko versus Eddie Guerrero, or Lance Storm versus Chris Jericho. Good, solid chain wrestling. We just saw Finn Balor versus Kyle O'Reilly the other night. Matches like that, all day, every day. Workhorses. You don't have the big guy that doesn't know how to work, or the big versus the little same size guys. I was always a fan of stuff like that. Again, you got Ron Simmons. In this, we're talking Super Bowl Ron Simmons versus Cactus Jack. Again, that's another match that I'd love to watch. Ron Simmons, the big burly babyface hero type. Cactus Jack, the insane, crazed lunatic. You had Rick Rude as the United States champion in this Super Bowl pay-per-view. He beat Ricky Steamboat. I always liked Rick Rude as sort of your secondary champion for WCW when he was the U.S. champ and stuff like that. I thought that meant, he didn't get obviously the rub in WWF that he should have got as far as being a world champion. And he was the Intercontinental champion there for a little while, so having him as a United States champion here and beating somebody like Ricky Steamboat, I was always a fan of that too. Again, in the main event on the Super Bowl, you got Sting beating Lex Luger for the WCW Heavyweight Championship. Wins the title here and stuff like that. So again, that's just money. Anytime Sting and Luger were good friends, they had good storyline stuff together where, everybody knew in kayfabe that they were real life friends and stuff. The following pay-per-view you got in May of '92 now was Wrestle War. So in Wrestle War, again, you want to talk about talent and stuff like that. Freebirds, boom. You got the Freebirds going against Terry Taylor and Greg Valentine for the United States Tag Team Championship. You might be saying to yourself, what the heck is the United States Tag Team Championship? It is now a defunct title. Had a pretty short run there. But again, you got Terry Taylor and Greg Valentine as the champions going into this pay-per-view. Both of those guys were very much recently off of WWF runs, coming back. Terry Taylor got squashed with the Red Rooster gimmick, and Greg Valentine was, probably the second biggest heel in the company through the late 70s and early 80s and stuff like that. He had a bunch of runs with the Intercontinental title, a lot of good feuds. So them using them here, again, they lost the titles to the Freebirds. I think they had won it not too long beforehand. You got Johnny B. Bad starting up with the company. A very young Mark Merrow, Johnny B. Bad. I'm a big fan of Mark Merrow. I love boxing. I love the fact that he was an actual Golden Gloves boxer. I always thought he had a good style as the boxer marvelous Mark Merrow when he came back. I thought they could have done more with that gimmick. But, the Johnny B. Bad gimmick was a little over the top. The Wild Man gimmick when he came into WWF was a little over the top. But I always liked Mark Merrow. And he was married to Sable for a little while, so that, props to him. You got Scotty Flamingo, a.k.a. Raven, against the very fresh-faced Marcus Alexander Bagwell in this. Scotty Flamingo, who would obviously go on to be Raven and become probably the top heel in ECW, and was, a big heel in WCW and WWF. He was the only guy to ever get an action figure from the original San Francisco Toy Makers WCW line, the Toy Biz WCW line, the WWF Jax line, and the ECW original San Francisco Toy Makers. He was the first. He might be the only one that did all of them. And he also got a TNA Toy Biz figure and stuff. They had the Super Invader on this pay-per-view as well. Super Invader was really just Hercules Hernandez in a mask. They were getting a lot of that cast off of WWF stuff. This was when really before Hogan and Macho Man came, 93, 94 to WCW. This is when they were sort of just getting the dregs of, the mid-card guys that didn't want to get pushed around anymore. In this pay-per-view, you got Flying Brian Pillman defending his light heavyweight championship against the Z-Man. Those guys worked very well as a tag team, I thought. They were, similar shapes, sizes, looks. They looked like the stereotypical 90s dudes that you probably would have seen in a club in Malibu or something like that. And with them working against each other for a title. I'm pretty sure Tom Zink may have been a little heavy. He might have been a little heavier than the weight limit for the light heavyweight championship, but that's neither here nor there. The Steiner brothers in this pay-per-view had a had a match against Tatsumi Fujinami and Takayuki Iizuka. I don't know. I know Fujinami pretty well. He's obviously WWF Hall of Fame and stuff like that. But Takayuki Iizuka, I don't know a whole lot about. I think he was a tag wrestler in New Japan, and they wrestled for a #1 contenders shot at the IWGP title. They weren't wrestling. The Steiners, I believe, were the WCW tag champions at the time. It wasn't for their title. It wasn't for an IWGP title. It was for a #1 contender spot. And that was the semi-main under, obviously, the War Games match being Sting Squadron versus the Dangerous Alliance. I think this was basically the beginning of the demise of the Dangerous Alliance. Unfortunately, this was the beginning of where they stopped being a faction. I'm pretty sure that's a 5-star rated match. If you go and you watch, it's Sting, Barry Windham, Dustin Rhodes, Ricky Steamboat, and I believe Nikita Koloff. He had just returned. This wasn't his first face turn or anything like that. He turned face after Magnum TA got hurt. But him being a face, I always like to. I know he was probably a better heel, but I always like Nikita Koloff on the good guy side. And then again for the Dangerous Alliance, boom, Steve Austin, Rick Rude, Arn Anderson, Bobby Eaton, Larry Zbyszko. Those are all Hall of Fame dudes any day of the week. So again, this is just pay-per-views one after another. This is all stuff that I'm talking about. These are, 1 month after another, or every 3-4 months or whatever. You were getting pay-per-views like this with these types of guys. The next up being obviously Beach Blast. Beach Blast 1992. That was in June of 92. Let's see, for the results, you had Junkyard Dog. Now Junkyard Dog was starting to come into WCW. That's when Junkyard Dog was sort of on the declines, a little out of shape and stuff like that. But they were basically throwing him and Matt, with Big Josh, the Z-Man, and Junkyard Dog, fighting guys like Tracy Smothers, Richard Morton, and Diamond Dallas Page. Richard Morton, outside of the Rock and Roll Express, I never really liked. When he did the York Alliance and stuff like that, they tried to make him like a suit and tie Richard Morton and stuff like that. I never thought it worked. He was always a great baby face and a great seller, and a great tag team wrestler. This pay-per-view, Beach Blast, you had Scotty Flamingo, a.k.a. Raven, beat Flying Brian Pillman for the Light Heavyweight Championship, which was a big deal. Again, you got Ron Simmons beating Terry Taylor. Ron Simmons is working his way up the card there. Sting and Cactus Jack in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Again, they had a great rivalry. So you can see some of their rivalry in the WCW comic book that Marvel put out. If you ever get a chance to read any of those, I think it's like 12 issues or something like that. It's awesome wrestling comic book storytelling, and a lot of it has to do with Cactus Jack and Sting fighting each other. So at this pay-per-view, the main event with this, my favorite tag team of all time, the Miracle Violence Connection, Dr. Death Steve Williams and Terry Bam Bam Gordy. They fought the Steiner Brothers to time limit draw for the WCW Tag Championships, 30-minute time limit draw. WCW was very famous for doing time limit draw main events and stuff like that, or Broadways, as the people in the business call them. I love Gordy and Williams as a tag team. I don't know why. Dr. Death is my favorite, probably heavyweight professional wrestler. The Steiners are probably my favorite tag team of all time, aside from Miracle Violence. And to have those guys just beating the heck out of each other. And so they had a lot of good matches in WCW and Japan, those four. And this was one of them. It stinks to not have them have a definitive finish. Everybody, sort of leaves mad, but good showing. And that would lead us to Great American Bash of 1992, which is July of 92. And for that, they had a tournament bracket for the NWA Tag Team Championships. And again, you got Miracle Violence makes the finals. To get to the finals, they had to beat Larry O'Day and Jeff O'Day, which were Australian or New Zealand guys. They had to beat the Steiner Brothers then in the quarterfinals in a rematch of the previous month, which was big. They beat Ricky Steamboat and Nikita Koloff in the semifinals, which was a pairing they had been working a lot with the War Games match and stuff like that. And then eventually Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham in the finals. Barry Windham and Dustin Rhodes, also a very good tag team back in the day, but it was just nice to see Doc and Gordy sort of get the rub here. This pay-per-view also had Big Van Vader beating Sting for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. huge up, nobody thought Sting was ever going to lose, and he's the man of the hour, and Vader just, comes out and destroys him. And this was a big turning point for WCW too. I think it's cool having a big monster heel as your champion, even though WWE's territory is historically a face champion that just destroys monsters. It's always nice to have a guy like Vader absolutely could have and should have won the world title and just been champion forever had he wanted to be. So it was nice seeing Vader get the push there. Also nice seeing Doc and Gordy in the main event, get a win. After the Great American Bash, we had Halloween Havoc of 1992. That's October of 92. This is where it's sort of starting to go down. In between those two pay-per-views, Ron Simmons had won the World Heavyweight title. I love Ron Simmons as a World Heavyweight champion. Stud athlete, looked like a black Superman. And after Vader had beaten Sting, Ron Simmons took the title from Vader. This way they didn't have to have the two faces fight each other. And that was the first black heavyweight wrestling champion between all of the major promotions. I think WWF hadn't had a black champion at the time. WCW hadn't had a black champion at the time. Obviously, I don't think New Japan or All Japan, would have. But that was a hugely monumental thing. They had all the faces in the locker room out and stuff. But the Halloween Havoc is sort of the decline. This is where I love all of the end of 91, all through 92, and then this is sort of the beginning where it starts going. And obviously in 93, Flair comes back. Vader wins the title back from Ron Simmons, which was a disappointment. He didn't get a long, lengthy run. They put the title back on Flair when Flair comes back, because at this time Flair is in WWF, winning the 1992 Royal Rumble and main event in WrestleMania with Randy Savage and stuff like that. But then, in 93, Flair comes back. They put him on top. They make him a face, and it was, sort of a weird showing. But Halloween Havoc in 92. Again, you got guys like Eric Watts. Bill Watts was the promoter at the time. He was booking everything. He's the guy that was responsible for Ron winning the world title, but he's also responsible for putting his kid all over everywhere. Van Hammer was starting to come in. I always liked Van Hammer. We went to a WCW house show, and when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, I can vividly remember Van Hammer being there, and he seemed like he was 12 feet tall. On this Halloween Havoc, though, even though, like I said, this is basically the end of where I like the 1992 WCW era, because then it starts changing in a different direction. You got Ricky Steamboat versus Brian Pillman on the card. Who's not going to want to watch that? Two great workhorses. Vader now was they put the U.S. title on him, so he beats up Nikita Koloff and defends his United States title on there. Again, Vader probably deserved better than a mid-card title like that, but what are you going to do? We had Barry Windham's and Dusty Rhodes versus Steve Williams and Steve Austin in a time limit draw. There was I forget, something had happened there. But Steve Williams and Steve Austin as a tag team is sort of weird thrown together. They're both actually named Steve Williams, and they should have had that feud in the Attitude Era when Doc came in and was supposed to win the Brawl for All, and that didn't happen, and Austin didn't want to work with him. You also had Rick Rude defeating Masachono for the NWA Heavyweight Championship. I'm pretty sure that was the big gold belt they were using at the time. Masachono had won the title, I believe, in the G1 Climax. They put it up or something like that. The NWA title was for grabs maybe in the G1. I could be wrong. Again, I didn't fact check it. I didn't do a lot of notes on. I'm trying to not do a big study here with it. I just want to sort of be more off the cuff, so you can sort of see my experience and my real wealth of knowledge that I'm just digging from up here as opposed to writing down somewhere. But Masachono on a WCW pay-per-view, I love that stuff. Any of the New Japan, All Japan guys, whenever they were in WCW was very good about that, incorporating, the Japanese wrestlers, Mexican wrestlers, even European wrestlers and stuff. And then this was Ron Simmons defeated the Barbarian to defend the World Heavyweight Championship on this match. I guess it would be shortly after this that they take the title off of him. And then you got Sting versus Jake Roberts. I think Jake Roberts only really did like one big pay-per-view for WCW. Again, this was when WWF was just starting to the dregs were going over to WCW for a little bit more money. The Coal Miner's Glove is panned by critics alike. and they apparently they had to spin the wheel, make a deal. You know, there's all the different match stipulations in the wheel, and apparently it was a shoot wheel that they just spun it, and it landed on coal miner's glove. And it could have been, you know, if they would have had it worked a little better, they probably could have had a better stipulation match to get a, you know, to get a better match out of these two. We never really saw a coal miner's glove before this, I imagine, on a big pay-per-view or after it. And that's probably more of a regional thing in the Appalachian Mountains or whatever in Lackawanna, Pennsylvania. But that's it. I know we're already up to 25 minutes on this. I don't even know how many people would have even made it this far. But don't sleep on 1992 WCW. You got a lot of talented people. You got a lot of great pay-per-views. Most of my favorite pay-per-views from WCW, if we're not talking about obviously the Monday Night War era, even so, most of my favorite pay-per-views are from that era. Great Muta, Masachono, Sting, Vader, Liger versus Brian Pillman. You got, you know, Miracle Violence was a top tag team. You got the Steiner brothers. A lot of talent in that roster. A lot of solid pay-per-views. You got the 5-star match with the War Games match. If you have the time and you ever feel like I'm not paid for these or anything, you know, whatever, but if you want to take the time out, start at the end of 91 and work your way all the way through on the WWE Network, watching all those 1992 WCW pay-per-views. You won't be disappointed. It's one of my favorite. I'm looking forward to do some more of these about, you know, I got another couple eras that I want to do. I'm going to try to go in order, try to upload these in order and stuff like that so we can go year by year. And hopefully somebody gets a kick out of it or something like that. I'm in my PJs right now, and I'm in my garage. I got some time to myself. So I'm going to end it here before we get to a half hour. And unsung professional wrestling eras that people don't talk about. This is Tim. Thanks for watching.